In this video, I'll show you how to build an AI avatar agent that automatically stores all of its conversations. We'll use Pipecat with a HeyGen avatar for real-time interaction, and then connect it to n8n so that every transcript is exported at the end of the call. From there, the workflow logs the entire conversation into Google Sheets, no manual copy and paste needed. By the end, you'll have a fully working system where every conversation is neatly captured and stored for later review or analysis. When it's all set up, it should look a little something like this.
Hi there. I'm your friendly AI assistant here to help with questions or anything you need. What's your name?
Hey, my name's James, and can you just tell me a fun fact about San Francisco?
Hi, James. Here's a fun fact. San Francisco is actually built on more than 50 hills, which is why the city's streets are so famously steep. Let me know if you want to hear more.
Got it. Can you just tell me a fun fact about New York?
Sure thing. Did you know that New York City's Central Park is larger than the Principality of Monaco? It's true. There's a lot of green in the Big Apple.
Interesting. Thanks, man.
You're welcome, James. And just to clarify, my name is not Ben, but I'm always happy to help. Let me know if you have any more questions.
And we see here it logged the name, the date, and some conversation notes about a recent conversation. The notes taken were the assistant introduced itself and asked for the user's name. The user, James, requested fun facts about San Francisco and New York. The assistant shared that San Francisco is built on more than 50 hills and that New York City's Central Park is larger than Monaco. The user mistakenly called the assistant Ben, and the assistant kindly clarified its name while continuing to offer help. So we can see here that this was all done automatically when we disconnected from the conversation, and I'll show you how we did it right now. So as you can see, this is the n8n workflow that I created and used for this example. I'm going to go over it more in depth later in the video, but from face value, what we were doing is we were sending a transcript of our conversation to this webhook right here. We're going to clean up that transcript a little bit and set it into a conversation variable. Then we're going to use an LLM chain to take this conversation and summarize it using our OpenAI LLM, and then output it in an organized style that will feed to this node to be able to append a row in our Google Sheet. For right now, I'm going to show you how to set up the voice agent and then the AI avatar, and how we'll be able to connect our code to set up post requests to this webhook. All right, so first things first, we need to set up our Pipecat voice agent. So search up Pipecat Quick Start right here, and then click on this first link. Usually it says Quick Start. Now we're going to be following this document step by step, but don't worry, I'll walk you through each step. First, we need to set up our local development environment, and it also warns us about these API keys we need to get. But the first thing we should really do is clone the Quick Start repository. So you can just copy this whole command right here. Make sure you have that copied, and then head over to your code editor of choice. So I'm going to be using Cursor, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new project. I'm going to open a new folder as well. And I'll call this Convo Saver Avatar. And I'll click Create. All right, now that our folder has been created, let's pull up the terminal. On Mac, you can do that by clicking Control/. And right here is where we'll paste in our command. So paste in that command from the docs. What we're going to be doing is grabbing our own local version of the Quick Start repository on our own computer, and then going into that directory that we have just got by cloning. So I'm going to click Enter right here, and we'll see here that we have fully cloned the repository, and we have this Pipecat Quick Start folder, which you should have on the side full of these files. Now, the next thing we need to do is set up our environment file. And in this repository, they already gave us an example environment file. So what we can do right now is actually just copy this over to a new environment file. And we're going to do that by running the copy command in the terminal. So what I'm going to write is copy env.example into a new file called .env. Now, if you run this, you'll see that we have created this .env file, and it's an exact copy of that .env example file that we were just looking at. Now let's actually retrieve our API keys to put into this environment file. All right, so back in the docs, we can just click on these links one by one to retrieve our API keys. First up is Deepgram. Let's click on this link, and you can create an account and log in. And what you can do is create an API key right here. And to create an API key, click on this green button that says create a new API key. I'm going to call mine something like Convo Saver, and we can just click create key. Now let's copy this and bring it back to our code. All right, and in this first line, let's delete this and paste in our Deepgram API key. Now let's go back to the docs to get our OpenAI API key. Let's do the same thing for OpenAI. So let's click on this right here and we'll have to log in. Once you create an account, head over to platform.openai.com/API keys. And you can just click create new secret key. I'm going to call mine Convo Saver. Oops. And create the secret key. Now make sure you copy this as well. And let's head back to our code to paste it. All right. Now back in our code, let's just paste in this key right here. The last one we need to get is Cartesia. So let's just finish that up. So let's click on this link. Once you create an account and sign in, you'll be brought to this page right here. So just scroll down to where it says API keys, and you can just create a new API key by clicking on this new button right here. So I'm going to call my Convo Saver and I'll click create. Now, if I save this, let's head back to the code to paste this in. So let's paste this in. Now let's head back to the docs to see what's next. Okay, so we've now cloned the quick start repository. We've configured our API keys and our .env file. And now we need to set up a virtual environment and install dependencies. So let's copy this UV sync command and then head back to our code. All right, so now let's run UV sync. And this is going to install all of our dependencies that we need for our project in order to speak with our voice agent in real time in the Pipecat UI. So run this command. And we can see here everything that was installed. So we have our plugins like Cartesia, Daily, DeepGram, and we have OpenAI down here. So all of our dependencies are now successfully installed. All right, now the last thing we have to do is just run the bot. So we can do that by running uv run bot.py. And you can see here that they include this bot.py file for us, which is the whole functionality of the voice agent. As you can see here, we are making our imports at the top. We're loading our environmental variables, and then we have this run bot function, which sets up the whole pipeline and initializes all of our plugins, like our speech to text model with DeepGram, our text to speech with the Cartesia and selecting a voice, as well as our LLM. We're going to be using OpenAI, and then give some instructions to the assistant saying you're a friendly AI assistant, respond naturally, and keep your answers conversational. It sets up this context, which is basically the transcription we're going to be needing for later. And then this pipeline variable right here. So we're going to be using speech to text to take what we're saying and then get a result from our LLM, which is going to be fed into our text to speech model or Cartesia, so that our voice agent will be able to say what the LLM has responded with. Then if you scroll down here, we have a couple of event handlers. So when our client is connected, we're forcing the assistant to say hello and introduce itself. And then when we disconnect, we're canceling the session. Then we're just setting up some parameters, like make sure we can enable audio in and out. We're going to be adding some things to this later for the video of our avatar, and the bot is being run down here. So now let's run the command in the terminal, uv run bot.py. It says here it's going to be 20 seconds for the first run only, and then after that, it'll run immediately. So be patiently if it's your first time running the command. All right, so we see that our voice agent is ready to speak with at this URL. So let's go back to our browser and check it out. All right, so let's go to localhost 7860/client right here. And the Pipecat UI is up, so that's a good sign. The front end is working great. Now let's click connect to speak with our voice agent.
Hello, I'm your AI assistant, here to help with any questions or tasks you have. How can I help you today?
Yeah, can you tell me a fun fact about San Francisco, please?
Absolutely. Here's a fun fact. San Francisco is home to the famous crookedest street in the world, Lombard Street. This twisting, steep stretch features 8 sharp hairpin turns in just one block. It's both a scenic drive and a popular spot for tourists to snap photos. Have you ever visited San Francisco?
Yeah, I have. Can you just tell me a fun fact about New York in short?
Sure. New York City is home to the world's first pizzeria, Lombardi's, which opened in 1905 in Little Italy.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. If you have any more questions or need fun facts, just let me know.
Awesome. So we see that our AI voice agent is showing up and we can speak with it in the Pipecat UI. So let's continue the implementation now. All right, so the next part is we need to have our voice agent be able to call a post request to trigger our n8n workflow. So let's start by setting up this workflow in n8n. So head over to n8n.io. If you've never used this, it's basically just an AI automation software. It's a no-code environment, meaning instead of running a Python script with very complicated logic, you can just set up nodes to connect to each other to run a full AI automation. It sounds confusing, but I'm going to show you that it's pretty simple. So once you get to this page, create an account and sign in. You can also use the free trial for now if you'd like. And once you get to the dashboard, click on Open Instance. And here is where you're going to create workflows. So I already created the workflow for this project. You can access this workflow at my GitHub repository. I included it in this convosaver.json file. So if I click on that, you can just download this file right here. And once you have it downloaded, head over back to n8n and click on these three dots, click import from file, and import that combo saver file, this conversaver.json file into n8n. And that way this whole workflow will pop up. So what we're going to be doing is we set up this webhook, and this webhook is basically waiting for a post request to trigger it, right? It says post right here. We're going to be sending a post request to this webhook. And the reason it is going to be a post request is because we are focused on sending data over to this webhook. A few different API methods. The most common ones are get and post. Get is where we're focused on retrieving data, but post is what we were using. Like I said, we were sending data over, and the data that we are sending over is going to be our transcript. So let me go to my executions to show you guys what that actually means. We have this succeeded execution right here. So if I click on this node, what we did is in our code, our voice agent is going to be calling a Python function. And what we're going to be setting is our transcript. So as you can see here, we have a couple messages from the system. Say hello and briefly introduce yourself. Make sure to ask the user for their name. The assistant saying, hi there. Us saying, my name is James. Can you tell me a fun fact about San Francisco? And it's basically just the whole conversation in one transcript variable. And we have to make sure that we're sending that over to this webhook URL. All right, so in order to transport the conversation and send it over to this n8n webhook, we're going to be sending an API request. Now, first we need to import requests. That's how we're going to be able to make this post request in our function. And then secondly, we need to put in our n8n webhook URL. So what I'm going to write is n8n underscore webhook underscore URL. Copy this webhook right here. And the reason we're going to be doing that is because we're going to be sending it to this webhook, editing it a little bit, and having an LLM summarize the conversation to be able to put into a Google Sheet. So let's take that webhook back to our code. And for now, we're just going to paste it into this variable. But for best practices, you want to put this in your environment file. And right under where you pasted your n8n webhook URL, you need to paste in this function. And this is what we're going to use to send our transcript to n8n. So as you can see, we are passing in our transcript as our parameter. So we're making a post request with this request that we imported to our webhook URL, and we are passing in this transcript to give to n8n. Now, the way you usually know an API call worked is if it returns status 200. So we were doing a check right here. If this worked, say n8n post okay. But if we get a 404 or anything like that, we're going to say n8n post failed, and then it's going to output the reason for that. Now, the next thing we need to import is in between these two handlers. So this is on client connected. This is a function to handle when we enter the call, and this is a function to handle when we disconnect from the call. So right in between these, we're going to import this function right here. And this is the end in export function. This is where we're actually going to be calling this post to n8n function that we just defined right here. And we're going to be calling this function in the on client disconnected, because when we click disconnect from agent, that's when we know our conversation is done and our transcript is ready to be sent to n8n to log in Google Sheets. Now, if you can remember from up top right here, we had this context variable, which basically gets our whole transcript for us. And with this context variable, we're going to call the get messages method and pass that into transcript. So right now, this transcript has all of our messages in it for us. Then we want to pass that transcript like we saw into the post to n8n function, which is going to send a post request to our n8n webhook and trigger the whole AI automation from there. And then the way that we're going to include this end and export function is that on this on client disconnected, so we have this function to handle when we press the disconnect button in our Pipecat call, we need to call this end and export function. Right here, we're going to pass in the reason, which is a disconnect. We're going to call this end and export function. It's going to say conversation ended because we disconnected. It's going to gather the transcript from our context variable and send that post request to n8n. Also, one thing, it's giving me an error, so don't forget to put your URL in quotation marks like so. All right, so now we've done everything we needed in the code. We set up our post to n8n function, and we made this helper end and export to call our post to n8n function, which will actually be called when we disconnect from our call. Let's head over to n8n, and I'm going to show you step by step how our workflow functions. All right, so once again, I'm going to show you this workflow in executions because I think it gives a better idea of understanding what's happening in real time. So with this webhook, we can see we sent a post request to our URL, and the body is this transcript variable. So transcript is this key here. And then we have the dialogues in different indexes. So we have these two for system. I'm not too sure why there's two for the system, but that's the only transcript for the system. And then we have one for the assistant saying, hi there, I'm your friendly AI assistant here to help with questions or anything you need. What's your name? Then we said exactly, hey, my name is James. Can you just tell me a fun fact about San Francisco? The assistant said, hi, James. Here's a fun fact. San Francisco is actually built on more than 50 hills, blah, blah, blah. And it recorded this whole conversation here. So what we have to do from there is take that transcript JSON form, and we want to put that into a conversation variable so that we can use later. So what I did here is I scrolled down to this body variable. And for this transcript right here, I just made a new variable called conversation, and you drag and drop in right here. So for the output, we can see that we have this conversation variable, and then we have the whole transcript saved in there. So as you can see here, we have the role and then the content, the role, the content, the role, and the content. And that is how our conversation is saved. So now that we have our conversation variable, it's time to have an LLM actually summarize what's going on. So for this, we selected an LLM chain node. And the way that this works is we feed it the conversation by saying this is a conversation between a user and assistant. Make sure you have defined below for the prompt and require a specific output format because we're going to need this in JSON. And then what I said here is look at the conversation, which is in JSON format, and extract the name. For example, if the sentence is, "Hi, I'm Sarah," you need to extract Sarah and set the name variable to that. Thoroughly and accurately summarize the conversation and put that in conversation. When doing so, ignore messages from the system. The conversation is just between the user and the assistant, right? So we don't want those messages saying, "Hey, this is who you are as an assistant." We just want it between the avatar we're speaking with and us. And then we also set the date. We don't need a specific time, so we're using this as a reference, and we put in this now variable. Okay, and you can see once we do that, it actually summarized this conversation for us. It set the name, and then using that now variable, it figured out what date we spoke with it, and it accurately gave us a date in this format. And you have to hook it up to a model. So what I did for this is I hooked it up to my OpenAI account. You can select any model you like, and you need to paste in your API key like I showed you earlier in this video. And the third part of this LLM chain is the output parser. So I wanted to have this in JSON object notation. So I made this an object, and I gave it different properties. The first property was the name, and I said this is the name of the user. The second property was the conversation, which is the conversation between the user and assistant. And thirdly, I included the date, and I made sure that we need these three variables to output. And we can see that it did exactly that because it parsed it in this way. So now we have the name, conversation, and date. All we have to do now is just put this into Google Sheets. And so if you can see here, this Google Sheets node, if I open that up, what we did is I connected it to my Google Sheets account. For the resource, we're going to be editing a sheet within a document, and we're going to be appending a row. So what I did is I made this conversation with users spreadsheet, and then I just made 3 columns: name, date, and conversation notes. And this one right here is what the AI added in itself. So I added in the name, the date, and then that summary conversation that we had the LLM produce. So let's go back to n8n. Right, so what we're doing is we are appending a row because we want to append a new conversation. That's how we're going to store it in our Google Sheet. You can use different databases like Supabase or Pinecone, but for simplicity, I chose Google Sheets. And then you select your document, which I showed you is that conversation with users spreadsheet that I made. And then we only have one sheet, so just choose sheet 1. And what we do is basically just map out these variables to the columns, right? So we had the name, conversation, and date columns. So for values to send, you want to make 3: name, date, and conversation notes. And for each of those, you can just drag and drop right here from the basic LLM chain output. So I drag and drop the name, the date, and the conversation. So if we take a look at the output, this is how our Google Sheet is set up. And this is what we appended. The name was James. These are the conversation notes, and this is the date. And that's all we have to do in n8n in order to trigger this workflow. So now that you guys understand it, we see it's pretty simple. We're sending over our transcript, storing that in a conversation variable, having our LLM summarize the raw JSON content, and storing 3 variables, name, date, and conversation, by our structured output parser. And then we are feeding that to this node, which stores that in a Google Sheet in our account. All right, so now we're ready to test this thing out. What I want to do is add a couple of things to the prompt. So I'm just going to say keep responses around 2 sentences just for simplicity. And then in the session instructions right here, I'm going to say, make sure to ask for their name so that when our LLM reads the transcript, it can detect from the user messages what the actual name is. So let's save this. So to run this file, first thing we have to do is we didn't install the requests yet in our virtual environment, even though we added it. So let's just write uv add requests. Now we can run the file uv run bot.py. And let's head back over to our browser. Okay, and we need to make sure that we click execute workflow, or else when we send a post request to our webhook, it won't be able to successfully trigger the workflow. So click on execute workflow right here, and let's head over to localhost 7860. All right, so let's refresh this page and let's click connect and speak with our voice agent.
Hello, I'm your friendly AI assistant, here to help with anything you need. What's your name?
Yeah, my name is James. Can you tell me a fun fact about New York?
Nice to meet you, James. Here's a fun fact. The New York City subway system has 472 stations, making it the largest in the world by number of stops.
Interesting. And can you tell me a fun fact about San Jose, California?
Of course, James. Did you know San Jose is considered the heart of Silicon Valley? and is home to more patents than any other US pair city.
No, I didn't, but thank you.
You're welcome, James. If you ever want to know more fun facts or have other questions, just let me know.
And so we see that our workflow was successfully triggered and it showed up in our Google Sheets. And all we had to do in our code was write a function to send a post request to n8n, make sure that that function is being called when we disconnect from the client, and then just let n8n do the automation magic. All right, so the next step is we are going to be adding a HeyGen avatar to add a face to our voice agent. So head over to heygen.com and then click on interactive avatar. Then click on public avatars. And it'll show you this list of avatars we can use. But before we get into that, I'll show you how to implement the code to set up HeyGen. So head back over to your code. Now, if we go over to the docs to set up HeyGen, it says the first step is we need to install the required dependency and put in our API key. So let's get those two things out of the way. Let's copy this command and head back to our code. And okay, we can go ahead and paste in this command, but instead of using pip install, we're going to use uv add. uv is another package manager, but instead of installing directly into our environment using pip, we're just going to install and keep track of our dependencies in this piproject.toml file and this uv.lock file. Okay, so let's get back to the code and let's run this command. And we do have to set up our API key, so let's go to .env and let's just write in heygen underscore API underscore key. And let's head back to the browser and I'll show you how to grab that right now. Once you're in the browser, go to heygen.com, then click on your profile in the bottom left, then go to settings. And if you go to this left-hand sidebar and click on subscriptions and API, you can go over to HeyGen API and you can copy right here your API token. So once you have that copied, let's head back to the code and paste that in our environment file. Paste this in and let's head back to the docs. All right, and we see we have to make a few imports. We already import our operating system in our pipeline, but we do have to import these three, AIO, HTTP, and then a couple of HeyGen video services. So copy these three lines right here and head back to your code. All right, so in our bot.py file, we can just come down below here and import these three things. So AIO, HTTP, and our HeyGen video services. All right, now let's head back to the docs. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to, right here, it says configure the HeyGen service with the custom avatar. We already have these things like pipeline in our transport parameters. We have to do this in a little bit different way though, where we have to import WebRTC. So I'll show you how to do that right now. And there's one more import we have to add. We can add that right under here. It's not mentioned in the docs, but we need that in order to stream real-time video. And it is this import right here. We are importing a WebRTC connection. Now, the reason we're importing the small WebRTC transport because it's specifically designed to handle real-time video streaming over these connections. And this is crucial because HeyGen generates video frames in real time, and these frames need to be transmitted to our client. So that's exactly what RTC does. We're going to get low latency video streaming capabilities. Now that we have all of our imports and we successfully imported our API key, it's time to actually set up the HeyGen avatar in our main functions. We technically need to declare a new function, but that's just one line, and I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so first off, what we're going to do is we're going to come down to this run bot function, and we're going to select everything that is included in this function all the way to await runner task. So if I select all that from line 137 to 72, I'm just going to indent it. And the reason is we have to wrap the inside of this function in a new function, and that is this client session. This client session wrapper is needed because HeyGen is an external API service that requires HTTP connections to function. So we're going to create a HeyGen video service instance. We need to make sure that we can make HTTP requests to establish video sessions, stream video data, and handle real-time communication. This client session that we just pasted can handle multiple concurrent requests efficiently without blocking our main bot pipeline. Without this session wrapper, the HeyGen service wouldn't even be able to communicate with their servers, making the avatar completely non-functional. So the session object is then passed directly to the HeyGen video service constructor, establishing the connection that enables our AI avatar to come to life. So then we're going to pass this session object directly to our HeyGen video service constructor, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So right above the pipeline, go ahead and paste this in right here. Now this is initializing an instance of the HeyGen video service. We're grabbing our API key or setting our session property with the session variable that we defined previously right here. And then we are making a request to make a new session, setting the avatar ID to the default Sean Therapist Public. Now this is the default avatar, which we're going to be using just to test that it works, but you can easily change it later and I'll show you how. And we also have to include HeyGen in our pipeline right in between text-to-speech and our avatar output. So we can just go right here and write HeyGen. All right, and we have to swap out this whole create transport for our web RTC transport. And we need this because HeyGen avatars require specific video streaming capabilities that aren't guaranteed with the generic transport system. So you can just select these lines right here. For me, it's 154 to 167, and you can just delete them and you can paste in this. Now you can get all of this code from my GitHub repository for free, which I linked in the description. The problem with the old approach is that the WebRTC option uses generic transport params, which doesn't have any video output configuration. So there's no guarantee that video streaming is going to work for us. But now our avatar is all set up. So all we have to do is make our imports in the beginning. Then if we come down here, we had to initialize our HeyGen instance, wrapping that in a client session so we have access to HTTP requests, include the HeyGen in our pipeline, and then change up our bot function so we could access real-time communication with our avatar. So don't forget to grab this transport variable from my code or pause the video and copy and paste it. Now it's time to test out our avatar. Okay, so in order to test this, once again, run the command uv-run bot.py. All right, and it's going to show you some warnings, but don't worry, these aren't errors, so we don't have to worry about that. But we can speak with our avatar in the browser. So let's go ahead and test out our final product. And before we head over to localhost, make sure to click on execute workflow, because when we disconnect from our conversation, our script automatically sends a post request to this webhook, and we want to see how it works in real time. So let this be executed, and let's head over to another tab. Okay, so in browser, we're going to go to localhost 7860, and I recommend moving over this bot audio and bot video so we can see our avatar in a little bit bigger picture. And all we have to do now is click connect. So let's do that right now and wait for our avatar to show up.
Hello, I'm your friendly AI assistant here to help with anything you need. What's your name?
Yeah, my name is James, and can you just tell me a fun fact about Chicago?
Nice to meet you, James. Here's a fun fact about Chicago. The city is home to the only river in the world that flows backwards. The Chicago River's direction was reversed in 1900 to improve sanitation.
Interesting. Now, can you tell me a fun fact about yourself?
Sure, James. A fun fact about me is that I can chat about almost any topic, from ancient history to the latest tech trends, all day long without needing a break.
Got it. I mean, can you just tell me a latest tech trend?
Absolutely. One of the latest tech trends is the rapid development of generative AI tools, like ChatGPT, which can create text, images, and even music based on simple prompts.
Let's click disconnect here, and let's see our workflow is being executed. Okay, our workflow is done being executed. Now let's go ahead and check our Google Sheet. Boom, we have our conversation with users, we have our name, the date we spoke with our bot, and in the conversation notes, the assistant introduced itself and asked for the user's name. The user responded that his name is James and asked for a fun fact about Chicago. The assistant shared that the Chicago River flows backwards, a unique feature reversed in 1900 for sanitation purposes. James then requested a fun fact about the assistant, and finally, James asked about the latest tech trend, and the assistant mentioned the rapid development of generative AI tools that create content from simple prompts. So super cool. We see that our n8n workflow is working. We trigger the webhook and we go through this whole process to append our conversation in a Google Sheet. Now, obviously, you don't have to go through the whole training process if you want the raw conversation, but I find it a little bit easier if you just use an LLM to accurately summarize what the conversation was saying. That is a simple example of how you can hook up n8n workflow to a local Pipecat setup while including an avatar and seeing the transcript. The last thing I wanted to show you is just how you guys can change out the avatar. So if you go to interactive avatar right here, and then we click on public avatars, it's going to load this full example of avatars you can use. Now we want those horizontal avatars because that's how Pipecat has their UI set up with the bot. So I'm going to find the one that we use. I'm pretty sure right here, it was Sean Therapist. So that is the default one, but you can use any of these avatars just by clicking on the three dots and clicking on copy ID. And then when we initialize our HeyGen instance right here above pipeline, right here in avatar ID, you can just paste in the ID for the avatar you'd want. The same thing goes for the voice right up here. So where we initialize our text to speech with Cartesia, this is a British reading lady, but if we go back to Cartesia.ai, voice is super easy to change. So you just come here in Cartesia and click on voices in the library. And any of these voices you can use, right? So you can click on these three dots right here and you can click copy ID. Now we have the ID copied for this voice. And if we head back to our code, you can paste that in that line. That's it, guys. Let me know if you enjoyed the video in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.